people who think in a disciplinary silo think, you know, I have worked on many fields, but I've only worked on one field, which is protecting life in its diversity, both in nature and society. Yeah? So every time I've seen unnecessary violence and a narrative that doesn't explain it, then, you know, I have an urge to understand the roots. To me, that's science. Understanding the causation, you know, and the processes through which something came to be. The entire Punjab violence, my journey with agriculture, the ownership of life. You know, the government has just announced the G20 will be held in India next year. Huh? And as you know, I've always talked about the earth as one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam ka matlab yehi hai na? But it means in a very deep way, it means three things. First, it means if everyone's your relative, you can't do harm to them. You know, if the forests and the rivers and the mountains are your relatives, then you have to respect them. So the whole issue of limits to your action, you know, and your ethical grounding comes from that. So it's not an empty phrase. The second is, if the whole world is a family, then the color of the skin, your faith, your gender can't be reasons for discrimination. They're just part of the diversity of what we are, just like every plant on this farm is different. But they're part of one ecosystem that's interconnected. And the third very important part is, you know, we are kind of obsessed with the language of invention and innovation. It's become like the vocabulary of our time. But it has also created illusions of our time. My work on seed began when the corporation said, we've invented the seed. No, you don't invent a seed. You put a gene into it, that's not making the seed. And it's not making the next 20 generations of the seed, because the patent holds for 20 years. And there's a very, very important case in America. Bauman versus Monsanto. Please read it. Bauman was a farmer who used to save soya seeds. He never bought them. And he used to go to the elevator where grain is kept and buy soya and then plant it. So Monsanto sued him. And he lost at the local circuit level, he lost at the district Supreme Court, he lost at the state Supreme Court, he lost at the federal Supreme Court. And, you know, I know one of those judges has got an honorary doctorate with me in the University of Paris. She's very good. But she was part of the judges who said a seed is a self-replicating machine invented by Monsanto. No, it's not a machine. Its self-replication is because of its own autopoiesis. And to reduce it to a machine, you know. So to have the illusion of, you know, of what humans create is part of what I call the extractivism, yeah. You take what nature creates and say, I created it. Yeah? You take the work of women and say, no, no, they are passive, they don't produce, they have don't do work, their knowledge doesn't count. And then you do biopiracy and say, neem maine banaya. Neem, basmati wheat, every medicinal plant of the country, yeah? And this then puts another, if the earth is really your family, then the idea of inventing your relatives, the idea of owning your relatives, the idea of having private property rights on your relatives is ontologically a very big confusion. You know? So I think, you know, aap sab Hindi sikhate hain, so it would be very interesting to go into the deeper philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And its, you know, its interactions with the dominant system. I'll give you a simple, two of you come from Atlanta. think that's where Coca-Cola's headquarters are.
Yeah.
Now, in the bottle of Coca-Cola is always written manufactured by Coca-Cola, right? They're not talking about the plastic water bottle. They're talking about what's inside. But Coca-Cola can't manufacture water. They just pirate it. Yeah? And I don't know if I shared with you the case of Plachimada. Okay, then this is important. 2002, Earth Day is 22nd of April. Now it's called Mother Earth Day because of the Bolivians, who, the other people who put together, and I was part of the team, the Rights of Mother Earth Declaration. So I think a week before 22nd, I get a call from Coimbatore to say the women of Plachimada would like you to come and celebrate Earth Day with them. And they're fighting Coca-Cola. So I didn't know Plachimada. I couldn't understand why village women would be fighting Coca-Cola. I know people who care about health think this is a totally unnecessary drink that has ruined people's health. So I flew to Coimbatore, and then I think it was another 4 hours drive to Plachimada, and I arrived there. And there were about 100 women and children, tribal women and children, led by a woman called Mai Lama, who has been to this farm, and we have honored her with a water award. So they're standing there, they call me, I come to the stage, we talk about water, and there's 500 policemen. And I'm just looking at that scene and saying, these people will absolutely massacre this community. Because the corporations use this military power of the state to protect to defend their theft. Yeah. So I spent some time talking about strategies. I asked Mai Lama, I said, when I go back to Delhi, what do you want me to tell the people in the city? And she just said, tell them when they drink Coca-Cola, they drink the blood of my people. It's become so strong for me, this message of hers. People put a bottle of Kinley when I'm giving a speech, and my throat will be parched. I can't touch it. So now I always tell them, get me a jug and a glass of water, please. Do not put Kinley or Aquafina there. So then I did 3 things. This is how I function. If I find there's an issue and there's a problem, I try and understand it deeper. So I ask the communities to start calculating how much water was being extracted. Now, for every liter in a bottle, 10 liters has been destroyed. That's the footprint. So 1.5 million liters extraction per day. Then we help the community to do tests on the water because heavy metals are built up. In every Coca-Cola plant, they take the fresh water, but then because of reverse osmosis, heavy metals build up. I asked who was the local panchayat. I called the head of the party. I said, you're absent. Here's this village fighting for its life. The editors of every newspaper weren't putting a line in their newspapers because of Coca-Cola's advertising power. So one newspaper in Kerala, created as part, the really independent newspapers of India are part of the independence movement. So Mathrubhumi is a very important newspaper. Virendra Kumarji, I contacted him, and he said, I will not take the ads. And he started to cover. And once a news is covered, then the other newspapers have to cover it too. So then the Hindu fell in line, and the Times of India fell in line, and it started to come out, this news. But I also supported the community to fight a case. And it's a very important case. The community filed a case in the High Court of Kerala and the judge gave a decision that water is a commons and it belongs to the community. And neither the state nor Coca-Cola has a right to the community's water. You know, the state cannot allocate rights to Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola cannot just take what they want to. So they have to stop the mining. And this case, then, of course, they try to challenge it. But I don't know how many of you are aware that the COP27 is being sponsored by Coca-Cola. And there's huge campaigns. But even the Copenhagen summit, you know, when you got off the flight, you know, when you what are these things called that connect the plane to the gateways? Yeah. When you have Exxon advertising, you have all the companies advertising inside and outside. So in Coca-Cola advertising in Copenhagen in 2009, it said Copenhagen. Copenhagen had been changed to Copenhagen. And then there was the bottle. And there's a brilliant film, I would see, if you can somehow find it. It's Nick who made it, and I know him because he came and filmed Teddy Goldsmith, one of the most precious ecologists, you know, and he founded the journal called Ecologist. Nick has done a film called Burp. Coca-Cola पी के आती है ना? Or gas से burp. It's a story of the Coke-Pepsi fights, you know. And he's done it brilliantly that every president of the United States has either been a Pepsi president or a Coke president. And if they're a Coke president, they push Coca-Cola into every country. And if they're a Pepsi president, they push Pepsi into every country. But in that is also a scene of why now of course it's plastic bottles, but earlier the glass bottle used to have this shape. And Coca-Cola was selling both to the Allies and to the Germans. Both sides of the war were getting Coca-Cola. And the reason they designed the bottle that way, it was so ugly. Yeah? That every time they drink Coca-Cola, they think they're holding a woman's body in their hands. Yeah? And it's there in this film called Burp. And of course, you know, Coca-Cola was created during the Prohibition movement, when, you know, there was a huge Prohibition movement in America. And they started Coca-Cola, and they always kept the ingredients secret. Yeah? So at the end of it, the Plachimada Coca-Cola story is we had a case. Every time we did anything big in India, I would take entire people down to Plachimada. We had the World Social Forum. How many of you are aware of the social forums? You know, there's a World Economic Forum sitting in Davos. And the Brazilians hosted a World Social Forum. The first one was in Porto Alegre in southern Brazil. And the World Social Forum came to India in probably 2003, 2004, in Mumbai. So lots of people had come for it. José Bové, the French farmer, European parliamentarians, Maud Barlow. And we had lots and lots of events in Bombay itself. But then I took many of them down to Plachimada. And we had a huge conference. And in the middle of that conference, a letter comes to me inviting me to come with the foreign delegates into the Coca-Cola plant. And I wrote back and said, no, we are the guests of the local community. And if you invite them, then they will take us along.